You think you know Carol Burnett. The laughter. The iconic ear tug. The sketch comedy that made millions of families gather around their television sets every Saturday night. But what if I told you that behind America's Sweetheart was a woman who faced betrayals, heartbreak, and conflicts so devastating they nearly destroyed her? What if the smile that lit up living rooms across the nation was masking pain so profound that it would take decades to heal? Today, we're pulling back the curtain on Carol Burnett's real Hollywood story. The firing that shocked the entertainment industry. The marriage that crumbled under pressure. And the family addiction curse that haunted 3 generations. This isn't the fairy tale you remember. This is the truth. Let's start with the moment that changed everything. The year was 1973, and the Carol Burnett Show was at the absolute peak of its success. 23 million viewers tuned in every week. Emmy Awards lined the shelves. And at the center of it all was Carol Burnett, alongside her comedic partner, Harvey Korman. They were television gold. Every sketch they performed together became instant classic material. The chemistry was undeniable. Harvey's straight-man delivery perfectly complemented Carol's physical comedy genius. But behind those bright studio lights, something dark was brewing. Something that would explode in a way nobody saw coming. Harvey Korman was being paid $25,000 per episode in 1973. That's the equivalent of over $150,000 per episode in today's money. He was a star. He knew it. And apparently, he decided that gave him the right to act however he wanted. According to multiple sources close to the production, Harvey started showing up to rehearsals with an attitude that could freeze lava. He wasn't just having a bad day. This was a pattern. Week after week, his behavior deteriorated. The cast and crew started noticing the changes immediately. Harvey would snap at guest stars during rehearsals. He'd roll his eyes when directors gave him notes. He started ignoring Tim Conway's jokes during filming, completely ruining scenes that had been meticulously planned. But Carol, being the professional she was, tried to let it slide. She'd seen Harvey in moods before. The man was a perfectionist, and perfectionism can sometimes look like irritability. She gave him space. She gave him the benefit of the doubt. She believed that whatever was bothering him would pass. But it didn't pass. It got worse. Much worse. During one particular week of rehearsals, Harvey's behavior crossed every line imaginable. He was openly rude to the guest stars. These were established performers, people who had been gracious enough to come on the show, and Harvey treated them like they were beneath him. He criticized the writers. He complained about the sketches. He made the entire environment toxic. The energy on set went from collaborative and joyful to tense and miserable. Everyone could feel it. Everyone was walking on eggshells around Harvey Korman. Then came the moment that Carol couldn't ignore. The moment that would define her as not just a comedian, but as a leader. Harvey was in his dressing room between rehearsals. Carol approached him, probably hoping to have a calm, professional conversation about what was going on. Maybe she wanted to check in on him. Maybe she wanted to address the tension that was suffocating the entire production. We don't know exactly what was said. But we do know what happened next. Harvey Korman slammed the door in Carol Burnett's face. He literally shut the door on her. The star of the show. The woman whose name was on the marquee. The person who had helped make him a household name. Carol stood there for a moment, processing what had just happened. And in that moment, something shifted. This wasn't about egos anymore. This wasn't about artistic differences. This was about respect. This was about the culture she had worked so hard to create on her show. A culture of collaboration, professionalism, and mutual respect. Harvey had just shattered all of that with one aggressive, dismissive gesture. Carol walked away from that dressing room door and picked up the phone. She called Harvey Korman's agent directly. Her message was clear and non-negotiable. Harvey Korman would not be working on the Carol Burnett Show anymore. He was fired. Effective immediately. The phone call probably lasted less than 5 minutes. But the shockwave it sent through Hollywood lasted for weeks. Nobody fires Harvey Korman. He was one of the most talented comedic actors of his generation. He was integral to the show's success. Ratings could plummet without him. Sponsors could get nervous. The network could intervene. But Carol didn't care about any of that. She had drawn a line, and Harvey had crossed it. The decision was made. News of the firing spread through the industry like wildfire. Other cast members were stunned. Some probably wondered if Carol would actually go through with it. Others might have secretly applauded her courage. The network executives likely panicked. But Carol stood firm. Then, something unexpected happened. Harvey Korman realized what he had done. The man who had been so arrogant, so dismissive, so convinced of his own importance, suddenly understood that he had made a catastrophic mistake. He reached out to Carol. Not through his agent. Not through intermediaries. He came to her directly and asked for forgiveness. He asked for a second chance. And here's where Carol Burnett showed the world who she really was. She could have held the grudge. She could have made an example of him. She could have let him twist in the wind while he watched his career opportunities evaporate. But she didn't. Carol gave Harvey a second chance, but it came with crystal clear conditions. Whatever personal problems he was dealing with needed to stay at home. When he came to work, he needed to be professional. She told him that whenever she saw him, he better be whistling and skipping like everything was wonderful. She wasn't going to tolerate the dark cloud anymore. Harvey agreed. He returned to the show, and by all accounts, he kept his word. The incident was never mentioned again publicly during the show's run. But it happened. And it proved that Carol Burnett, behind that warm smile and gentle demeanor, had a spine made of steel. But Harvey Korman wasn't the only man who would test Carol Burnett's strength. There was another conflict brewing in her life, one that was far more personal and infinitely more painful. His name was Joe Hamilton, and he wasn't just her colleague. He was her husband. He was the father of her 3 daughters. And he was the producer of the Carol Burnett Show. Their professional and personal lives were completely intertwined. Which meant when things started falling apart, there was nowhere to hide. Carol Burnett met Joe Hamilton in 1963. He was a television producer, charming and talented. He understood the industry. He understood her ambitions. They fell in love quickly, and when they married in May of 1963, it seemed like the perfect Hollywood union. 2 creative people who could build an empire together. And for a while, that's exactly what they did. Joe became the executive producer of the Carol Burnett Show, which premiered in 1967. Together, they created television history. They won Emmy Awards. They launched careers. They built something that would be remembered for generations. But success comes with a price. Especially success at that level. Carol was working insane hours. Rehearsals all week. Live tapings on Friday nights. Script meetings. Costume fittings. Press appearances. Interviews. It was relentless. And Joe was right there with her, managing the production side of things, dealing with network executives, handling budgets and logistics. They were building a comedy dynasty, but they were sacrificing their personal life in the process. The couple had 3 daughters together. Carrie, born in 1963. Jodie, born in 1967. And Erin, born in 1968. 3 girls who needed their parents' attention. 3 girls who were growing up in the shadow of their mother's enormous fame. Carol has admitted in interviews that she blamed herself for the failure of her marriage to Joe Hamilton. She said she was too focused on her work. Too consumed by the demands of the show. She prioritized her career over her relationship, and by the time she realized what was happening, it was too late. The damage was done. But there was something else contributing to the breakdown of their marriage. Something that would haunt Carol Burnett for the rest of her life. Their eldest daughter, Carrie, was struggling with addiction. And that struggle was tearing the family apart from the inside. In 1982, after 19 years of marriage and 3 daughters, Carol Burnett and Joe Hamilton agreed to a trial separation. Carol made a public statement at the time, acknowledging that her daughter's addiction problems were driving a wedge into her marriage. Think about what that means. They weren't just dealing with the normal pressures of a Hollywood marriage. They weren't just dealing with demanding careers and busy schedules. They were dealing with the nightmare of watching their child destroy herself with drugs and alcohol. They were dealing with the helplessness, the fear, the constant crisis management that comes with loving an addict. And they were dealing with it in the public eye. The trial separation didn't work. They couldn't find their way back to each other. In 1984, Carol Burnett and Joe Hamilton officially divorced. 21 years of marriage ended. The partnership that had created one of the most successful television shows in history was dissolved. Carol was 51 years old, newly single, and facing the reality that her family was fracturing in multiple directions. Joe Hamilton would go on to remarry in 1991, but tragically, he died of cancer that same year at just 62 years old. Carol would eventually find love again with musician Brian Miller, whom she married in 2001. But the scars from her second marriage never fully healed. The what-ifs probably still linger. Could they have saved it if the circumstances had been different? Could they have found their way back if addiction hadn't stolen their daughter's childhood? Because that's the real tragedy at the center of Carol Burnett's story. Not the professional conflicts. Not even the divorce. The real tragedy is the generational curse of addiction that has plagued her family for decades. To understand the depth of this pain, we have to go back to the beginning. Back to Carol's own childhood. Back to where the pattern first started. Carol Creighton Burnett was born on April 26, 1933, in San Antonio, Texas. But she didn't grow up with the typical American childhood. Her parents divorced when she was very young, and both of them were alcoholics. Her father, Joseph Thomas Burnett, and her mother, Ina Louise Creighton, were both consumed by their addiction to alcohol. They couldn't take care of Carol. They could barely take care of themselves. So Carol was raised primarily by her maternal grandmother, Mabel Eudora White, who everyone called May. Carol and her grandmother May moved to Hollywood, California, and lived in a small one-room apartment in an impoverished area. Money was always tight. Stability was a luxury they couldn't afford. But May did her best. She took Carol to the movies whenever she could scrape together enough money for tickets. Those movie theater trips became Carol's escape. Her window into a world of glamour, storytelling, and possibility. May encouraged Carol's dreams of performing. She believed in her granddaughter when nobody else did. That iconic ear tug that Carol did at the end of every episode of her show. That was a signal to May. A way of saying, "I love you, Nanny. We made it." But while May provided love and support, she couldn't erase the trauma of Carol's childhood. Carol watched both of her parents deteriorate from alcoholism. Her father died in 1954. Her mother died in 1957. Both deaths were directly related to their drinking. Carol was in her early 20s, just starting her career, and she had already lost both parents to addiction. She had watched them choose alcohol over everything else. Over their marriage. Over their daughter. Over their own lives. That kind of pain doesn't just disappear. It lives in your bones. It shapes how you see the world. And sometimes, despite your best efforts, it repeats itself in the next generation. Carol's eldest daughter, Carrie Hamilton, was born in December 1963. She was bright, creative, and talented, just like her mother. But when Carrie was a teenager, she fell into the same trap that had claimed her grandparents. Drugs and alcohol. Carol has described those years as absolute hell. Imagine being Carol Burnett. You're at the peak of your career. You're America's comedy sweetheart. Millions of people tune in every week to watch you make them laugh. But when you go home, you're watching your daughter spiral into addiction. You're finding drugs. You're having conversations no parent should ever have to have. You're terrified that you're going to lose her the same way you lost your parents. Carrie's addiction started when she was just 13 years old. 13. A child. She struggled with heavy drug and alcohol abuse for 3 years. Carol and Joe tried everything. Interventions. Rehab programs. Therapy. They were desperate. And then, miraculously, Carrie got sober. By the time she was 17, she had overcome her addiction. Carol has said that Carrie's recovery was one of the greatest joys of her life. They developed a close bond during Carrie's sober years. They even wrote a play together called Hollywood Arms, based on Carol's memoir One More Time. Carrie had turned her life around. She was acting, writing, pursuing her own creative dreams. Carol finally felt like they had beaten the curse. But life had other plans. In 2002, Carrie Hamilton was diagnosed with lung cancer. It spread to her brain. On January 20, 2002, Carrie died at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center in Los Angeles. She was only 38 years old. Carol Burnett lost her eldest daughter. The girl she had fought so hard to save from addiction was taken by cancer instead. Carol has said in interviews that she thinks about Carrie every single day. The grief never fully goes away. You just learn to carry it differently. You would think that would be enough tragedy for one family to endure. But the curse wasn't finished with the Burnett family. Carol's youngest daughter, Erin Hamilton, also struggled with substance abuse. History was repeating itself again. Erin, who was born in 1968, battled addiction issues for years. She had a son, Dylan, but her substance abuse problems made it impossible for her to provide a stable home for him. The situation became so dire that in 2020, Carol Burnett and her husband Brian Miller filed for legal guardianship of Dylan, who was 14 years old at the time. The court documents were heartbreaking. Carol stated that Dylan had been living in an unstable, unpredictable, and unhealthy environment due to his mother's ongoing addiction issues. Erin was in and out of rehab. She was unable to care for her son. And Carol, at 87 years old, stepped up to raise her grandson. Think about that. At an age when most people are retired, enjoying their golden years, Carol Burnett was back to raising a teenager. Not because she wanted to relive parenthood, but because she had no choice. Because addiction had once again ripped through her family and left devastation in its wake. In September 2020, a Los Angeles Superior Court granted Carol and Brian temporary custody of Dylan. The judge agreed that it was in the boy's best interest to live with his grandmother. Erin Hamilton has reportedly been working on her recovery, and there have been reports that she wants to rebuild her relationship with her son. But the damage is done. Another generation affected by the same demon that destroyed Carol's parents. The same demon that nearly took Carrie. The same demon that took years away from Erin and her son. Carol Burnett has been public about her family's struggles with addiction because she wants to remove the stigma. She wants people to know that addiction doesn't discriminate. It doesn't care if you're rich or poor, famous or unknown. It doesn't care if you're talented or kind or loved by millions. It takes root and it destroys. And the people who love addicts are left to pick up the pieces over and over again. Carol has said that both of her parents were alcoholics, and that she herself was fortunate not to have inherited that particular struggle. But she's watched it destroy 3 generations of her family. Her parents, her daughter Carrie, her daughter Erin, and now, by extension, her grandson Dylan. The strength it takes to survive all of that is incomprehensible. Carol Burnett has faced professional conflicts, yes. She's had to fire beloved co-stars and navigate difficult workplace dynamics. She's experienced the pain of divorce and the complexity of blending career ambitions with family responsibilities. But the real battle of her life has been against addiction. Not her own, but the addiction of the people she loves most in the world. And that's a battle you can never fully win. You can have moments of victory. You can have years of peace. But the threat is always there, lurking in the background, waiting for a moment of weakness. Carol Burnett is 92 years old now. She's lived an extraordinary life. She's made millions of people laugh. She's won countless awards. She's been celebrated as one of the greatest entertainers of all time. But when she's alone with her thoughts, when the cameras are off and the audience has gone home, she's thinking about the people she's lost. She's thinking about her daughter Carrie, who should still be here. She's thinking about her daughter Erin, who's still fighting her demons. She's thinking about her grandson Dylan, and hoping that the cycle finally stops with him. What can we learn from Carol Burnett's story? First, that the people who make us laugh often carry the deepest pain. Comedy is frequently born from tragedy. The ability to find humor in darkness is a survival mechanism. Carol learned early in life that if you can laugh, you can endure. Second, that success doesn't shield you from suffering. Carol Burnett achieved the American dream. She rose from poverty to become a television icon. But that success didn't protect her from the heartbreak of watching her family struggle with addiction. Money and fame can't fix everything. Third, that boundaries matter. When Carol fired Harvey Korman, she was setting a boundary. She was saying that talent doesn't excuse bad behavior. That respect is non-negotiable. And that lesson applies to every area of life, not just Hollywood sets. Fourth, that forgiveness is powerful, but it doesn't mean being a doormat. Carol forgave Harvey and gave him a second chance, but she made her expectations clear. Forgiveness doesn't mean accepting ongoing toxicity. It means giving someone the opportunity to do better, while maintaining your own standards. And finally, that resilience isn't about never falling apart. It's about putting yourself back together after life has shattered you into pieces. Carol Burnett has been shattered multiple times. By her parents' alcoholism. By her daughter's addiction and death. By divorce. By professional conflicts. By her second daughter's ongoing struggles. But she keeps going. She keeps showing up. She keeps finding reasons to smile. That's the real Carol Burnett story. Not the one you see in the highlight reels or the Emmy acceptance speeches. The real story is about a woman who has faced unimaginable pain and chose to keep living anyway. Who has watched addiction destroy the people she loves most and still finds the strength to laugh. Who has navigated professional betrayals and personal heartbreak and still maintains her grace. Hollywood loves to sell us fairy tales. Rags to riches. Happily ever after. But Carol Burnett's story is more valuable than any fairy tale because it's real. It's messy and complicated and painful. And it's proof that you can survive things you never thought you could survive. When Carol Burnett tugs her ear at the end of a performance, she's not just sending a signal to her grandmother's memory. She's reminding herself, and all of us, that love endures. That connection matters. That even when people are gone, the bonds we formed with them remain. Mae White died in 1967, just as the Carol Burnett Show was beginning. She got to see her granddaughter's dreams start to come true, but she didn't live to see the full extent of Carol's success. Carrie Hamilton died in 2002, taken far too soon. But Carol keeps their memories alive. She talks about them in interviews. She writes about them. She makes sure the world knows that they mattered. And that might be the most important lesson of all. That we honor the people we've lost by continuing to live. By continuing to love. By continuing to fight for the next generation. Carol Burnett is raising her grandson now, at 92 years old, because that's what love demands. It demands that we show up even when we're exhausted. That we try again even when we've failed before. That we break generational curses even when the odds are stacked against us. The Harvey Korman incident taught Carol that sometimes you have to be willing to blow everything up to maintain your integrity. The Joe Hamilton divorce taught her that even great love stories can end, and that's okay. The addiction struggles taught her that some battles last a lifetime, and victory is measured in small moments of sobriety, not permanent cures. These aren't the lessons Hollywood typically teaches. They're harder, more complex, less satisfying. But they're true. So the next time you watch a clip of the Carol Burnett Show, or see Carol receive another Lifetime Achievement Award, remember the full story. Remember the woman behind the laughter. Remember the conflicts she navigated, the pain she endured, and the strength she demonstrated. Remember that heroes aren't people who never fall. They're people who keep getting back up. Carol Burnett is a comedy legend, yes. But more importantly, she's a survivor. A mother. A grandmother. A woman who has faced the worst life can throw at you and refuse to let it break her permanently. That's the Carol Burnett you don't see on television. That's the story that needs to be told. Because it's real. Because it matters. And because somewhere out there, someone is watching their own family member struggle with addiction. Someone is dealing with professional conflicts that seem insurmountable. Someone is navigating the end of a marriage while trying to hold everything else together. And they need to know that survival is possible. That you can face unspeakable pain and still find reasons to laugh. That you can lose people you love and still choose to love the people who remain. That you can be broken and still be whole. Carol Burnett's legacy isn't just the sketches and the awards and the laughter. It's the example she set for how to be human in the face of inhuman circumstances. How to maintain grace under pressure. How to forgive without being weak. How to acknowledge pain without being consumed by it. How to keep going when every instinct tells you to give up. That's the real story. That's the truth behind the smile. And now you know.